Hey everybody, it's Dr. Sturts, and the reason for this call is I want to do everything I can to help you with the Week 4 project. By now you know that in the course room, right at the onset of the course, I set a announcement that provided a template for the project. Inside of that announcement is a ton of helpful information for the Week 4 project. For instance, I provide information on how to calculate net present value. And there's also a link in there that provides you information on what a pro forma financial statement even is. So there's a lot of supplemental information I've already provided. And of course, you know that I do weekly videos, which also share information about various topics for the weekly projects. So I've already provided a lot of help, but a lot of people regard this Week 4 project as one of the most difficult projects during the course. And so I thought, I've been thinking about how to help you guys more, and I thought that maybe a screencast where I walk through some reports that might be helpful to you. Okay, so I'm going to talk specifically about the pro forma financial reports. The important thing is that there should be pro forma financial reports from the launch of the concept until 2 years after you break even. So that's really important to have the appropriate number of years for your pro forma financial reports, and then also it's important to calculate your net present value. A lot of people just don't do that. Don't do these project deliverables, and then they miss a lot of points because they just skip it. And of course, you can skip it, but if you skip it, then as you can imagine, it's not possible to get college credit for that. Okay, so let's go to the reports themselves. As I mentioned, what I'm going to be talking about here is pro forma financial reports. There's already a lot of information, a lot of help out there for some of the other parts of the project deliverable. But so what I do, and I do this sort of thing for work all the time, so I get how maybe overwhelming it feels at times. But when I do this, I begin with what I expect for sales. So what I'm going to expect for revenue. Earlier, we talked about total market, and we wanted it to be quantitative. There's a reason for that, because with knowledge about the total market, I could say, okay, I'm going to have a market share ambition and then make that my revenue, right? So let's say that I'm opening up a restaurant and I want to, my ambition is to operate in a $100 million market. So my earlier research in the course told me that I'm in a $100 million market. And then my ambition is to have a 5% market share. So then if I do the math there, I end up that I'm going to have about $5 million in revenue. So that's one way. That's a market share way to calculate revenue. Another way to calculate revenue is to say, okay, my plan is I know I'm in a big market. I've already established that. So now my plan is to count the number of units that I'm going to sell, and then I'll use that to come up with the size of my revenue. So here, continuing with the restaurant example, I've said, okay, I'm going to serve, whether it's repeat customers or new customers, I'm going to serve 200,000 people, and each of those people are going to spend an average of $30 in my restaurant. So a little bit of more math, that gives me yearly revenue of $6 million. A couple ways to figure it out. I'm not going to really criticize or grade on the assumptions, provided they're just logical and sound, right? So that they make sense. Okay, so that's my revenue. And so as I begin the project, I can put my revenue right here where it says sales, because that's what it is, right? And as you think about your revenue, also remember that most businesses don't make money until somewhere between 3 and 5 years after they launch. So it would not be super logical to say, okay, my ambition is to have $600,000 in revenue. So what that means is I'm going to, right at the beginning of the year, I'm going to in that first quarter, right there, I'm going to be on my way to track toward $600,000. So $600,000 in revenue, it's about $500,000 a month. So that would mean I'm going to sell $1.5 million in that first quarter. That's super unlikely because we're just getting launched. We're just starting. Our marketing is just taking effect. We're just trying to get a reputation and a name. We're just trying to take customers from what they're already doing. So remember, it takes businesses usually 3 to 5 years to get to profitability. So it may be that in this first year, I will have in revenue, I'll have a lot less than $6 million. And maybe even next year. And the next year, I won't hit $6 million. But I can show growth and I can show progress, which is kind of what we expect with these new ventures. Okay, so that's where you'd put income, that's where you'd put sales. And then you can see, for the most part, for the purposes of our project, sales and gross profit. The only thing you would take out of once you have your sales in here, the only thing you would take out of your sales to get to gross profit, of course, is cost of goods sold. And so you could change the spreadsheet to be whatever you want. But essentially, sales minus cost of goods equals gross profit. Okay, so then after we have gross profit, we have a number of different expense categories, and you can look at that spreadsheet and you could say, oh my gosh, really? I've got to estimate what I'm going to spend on newspapers and magazines or parking? Give me a break. Well, so this spreadsheet is a standard sort of template spreadsheet. I wouldn't say that you have to have each category or even each major category covered. What I would do is I would just ask you to think through what is logical for your business. Okay, so I'm going to continue with the example of a restaurant. So what do I know? Well, I know to have a restaurant, I'm going to have some marketing expenses. That's going to be pretty important so I can get my name out there. So that's going to be kind of a major category of expenses for me. So I'm definitely going to want to have some marketing expenses represented on this form. I also know that because I have a restaurant, I'm going to need to have servers and chefs and bartenders and so on. And so I'm also going to have some fairly significant personnel costs, right? So I'm going to have information here in the employment section. I also am going to likely, going to be renting a building. And so here I'm going to need to have, rent and some other associated costs. So I would probably have information in the rental area, the occupancy area, as you can see there. What I don't see here is a category for cost of goods sold, and that is going to be fairly significant. Remember, I've got to purchase, steaks and salad and vodka and whatever else it is that restaurants need. So then I'm going to have a cost of goods sold section as well. So for my restaurant, I'm going to have a cost of goods sold section, an occupancy section, an employment, so a labor section, a salary section, and then also a marketing section. So I'm going to skip the rest of the sections, not because I won't have those costs. I could have those costs, but mainly because I want to give a high-level overview here, and I'm not going to go into every single little detail with every single little area. Okay? So then, your gross profit minus expenses comes down to your net profit, and it's okay. Remember, most businesses take 3 to 5 years to show a profit, so it's okay in the first couple of years to show that you're actually losing money. That's okay. But in the end, of course, the idea with the project is it's important to show these pro forma financial reports from when you start up to 2 years after you break even. Okay, so that's the income statement or P&L. And on here, I want to mention there's several different forms. I'm okay with you providing information on this for most of those. So you can see here that there's a sales section. So think of that as, if you go back to the deliverables, that is a sales forecast, right? So your sales forecast obviously is in this line. There's also an income projection. Your income projection is also on here, way down here. Income is in your net profit, whether it's yearly net profit or monthly. That should be quarterly. Quarterly net profit. There's a place for your net profit there. So this one form covers sales forecast and income projections. What's missing is cash flow. And cash flow is a really important thing for us to talk about, because what can happen is it probably isn't, the restaurant isn't a perfect example of how this can happen. But let's just say, for instance, I guess we'll use the restaurant as an example. So my plan is to serve about 200,000 people. And let's say that I need to purchase, in order to serve these 200,000 people, my cost of those $30 meals is half of that. So 50% of the $30 cost goes to materials, or, vodka and lettuce. And I'm not sure I'm picking lettuce. That's weird. Anyway, food, essentially. So to make a $30 meal or a $30 customer experience, I need to spend $15 with my vendors who supply me the various stuff that I need to serve my customers. So you can see, in order to do that, in order to make $6 million in sales, I also need to have about $3 million in product. Okay, so that's what, of course, is going to happen is I need to buy the product and then sell it to my customers. So presumably my vendor is going to want to get paid before I should get paid from my customers. Now, in the case of a restaurant, probably doesn't matter, because the products that I buy to sell, it's going to be pretty quick from the time I purchase the product to the time that I serve the customer to the time the customer pays me. So I don't really need to worry too much about cash flow, although I should fill out the cash flow for this project anyway. But let's say now that we are a manufacturing company and our supply chain is in China. So if you've dealt with Chinese manufacturing, unless you're air freighting products from China, which is very expensive, typically the transit time from the time you place an order with the factory to the time that the products show up at your dock in the country you intend to sell it, probably the U.S., it's about 16 weeks. So that's when cash flow gets to be difficult, because we need to order the material and pay for the material 4 months before we're actually going to have it in our hands and then ultimately sell to our customers. So it could be that for 4 or 5 months, we've got cash out to the vendor to buy the goods we're selling, but we don't have cash in from the customer so that we can have money to pay that vendor, right? So that's a cash crunch. And looking at this from a cash flow standpoint will help you identify these cash crunch pinch points. And there's a lot of ways to finance through cash crunches, so it's okay to have that. But by doing a cash flow statement, you can for sure identify these and act on them if necessary. It's not likely you'll have them for this, because you probably won't go into that level of detail, but it is an important exercise to know how to do this kind of work. And here, I wouldn't even say that you necessarily need to come up with every single little detail, but just come up with the major categories of things that should be in the cash flow statement, so that you can present a cash flow statement that's logical and thoughtful. Okay, so there's the video information. I hope this has been helpful. And if you need any help at all, then be sure and reach out to me. Remember, I am invested in you and your success. It's literally my job to help you, but I'm also passionate about you, your learning, and passionate about helping you successfully complete our project and our course.